Welcome back to part 2 of Know Your Customer Regulations and Benefits. In this section, we're going to talk about the reasons why you want to know your customer. We're going to focus in on the specific regulatory reasons for knowing your customer. Then we're going to move into some illustrations of how the Know Your Customer process can lead you to customer service excellence in your practice. And finally, we're going to round that out with looking at how the Know Your Customer process can improve your sales opportunities and outcomes as a practitioner in the financial services. Thanks for rejoining me. Let's get started moving into some of the regulatory reasons for knowing your customer. Often when we talk about Know Your Customer or KYC requirements, a lot of people think that it's very specific to the banking, investment, and insurance industries, but it goes well beyond that, as you can see from this illustration. Yes, banks, credit unions, and insurance and life insurance are required to have these types of requirements, but notaries in some provinces have a KYC requirement, accountants and accounting firms often do, lawyers, casinos, precious metal dealers, money service businesses, so places where you're transferring currency and that sort of thing, as well as in real estate and agents of the Crown as well. So as we can see, it has a very broad impact. Of course, we're not going to get specifically into all of these industries. We're going to focus on some of the financial services regulators in the KYC area, but it is important, even if you eventually leave the insurance or the financial services industry, that you still do understand the value of a KYC conversation, as it may be a requirement in other industries that you participate in throughout your career. As we saw in the previous slide, there are a variety of regulators that all operate in very different industries. So as you might imagine, there can't be one set of Know Your Customer regulations nationally that would impact all of these industries. So that leads us really into our first point about regulation for KYC, and that's that KYC requirements, generally speaking, are regulated by the industry itself or a body that oversees a specific industry. So there isn't per se one KYC authority that regulates Know Your Customer for a variety of industries, or even more than one at this point, but in fact each industry has its own organization, either internally or externally, that regulates Know Your Customer requirements for them. That body is also responsible for any enforcement that we might see there, so they control what the rules are for the specific industry, as well as how those rules will be followed and what the consequences of not following those rules are. Now, I did say that they control what those rules are. There is in many cases oversight on that or guidance on that based on the legislation that's in place regulating the industry at a higher level. So if there's a provincial or a federal requirement for a certain part of the KYC process, then the regulatory body is going to have to follow that regulation. Regardless of whether they may or may not agree with it, they will have to put something in place to show how it's going to be regulated. When we look at non-compliance with the various regulators, again, the regulatory body in question, so the regulator or the internal or external regulator, will look at what happens when someone is not compliant with the KYC requirements. Generally speaking, and often, what this means is a person is unable to practice as a member of that profession if they are in violation of their KYC requirements for the profession. So, for example, if you're found to be in violation of your KYC requirements in the mutual funds industry, then the Mutual Fund Dealers Association will have regulations on you as to whether you can sell funds or not when you've been found to be in violation of the KYC requirements. This isn't certain that it will always be the same penalty. Again, the regulator themselves do have the authority to set what the specific penalty for non-compliance is in each profession. Let's shift for a moment now to take a look at some of the specific regulatory environments that we're going to talk about today. So I'll give you a brief overview of the 4 specific environments we're going to look at in detail, and then I'll give you a brief overview of a 5th area, which is slightly different. So mutual fund dealers, or people who sell mutual funds, are regulated by the Mutual Fund Dealers Association of Canada. Now, often these people will work in the banking environment, but not always. So that's the first of the areas that we're going to look at. Secondly, we're going to look at people in the life and health insurance industry. So they have guidelines that are established by the Canadian Life and Health Insurance Association. The third regulator that we're going to look at is the regulation of financial planners. So again, there's a set of guidelines for financial planners set out by the Financial Planning Standards Council. Dealers in securities have rules set out by the Investment Industry Regulatory Organization of Canada, or IIROC. And then the 5th area that we're not going to spend a lot of detailed focused time on is banks, where the dealers are not governed by MFDA or IIROC. So if someone's selling a Know Your Client regulated product at a bank, and they're not a mutual fund licensed person or a securities dealer, the bank will have their own internal controls around the Know Your Client requirements for their customers. So again, to look at who we're going to focus on, we're going to look at mutual fund dealers, we're going to look at life and health insurance providers, we're going to look at financial planners, and we're going to look at securities dealers. One key thing to note is when you look at the mutual funds dealers and when you look at the securities dealers, you see that they have sets of rules that are set out by their industries. And when you compare that to people in the life and health insurance industry and financial planners, we're looking at a set of guidelines. I'll get more specifically into what that means for you as a professional when we review those in detail, but it's important to know the distinction that's there between specific rules and a set of guidelines. Let's get started with a more specific look at the Mutual Fund Dealers Association of Canada and their regulations around knowing your customer. So the Mutual Fund Dealers Association of Canada is abbreviated as MFDA, and most often you'll hear it referred to by that abbreviation because it is a little bit of a mouthful when you're saying the full name. They have a specific set of rules laid out for all of the practices of mutual fund dealers across the country. This again is a national regulatory body for all mutual fund dealers in Canada. And when we're looking at the Know Your Customer requirements, we're looking specifically at Rule 2 under their set of rules. Given that it's the second rule in the set of rules, you can imagine how important this is to them in terms of what mutual fund dealers must follow. And essentially what it lays out is that there's specific procedures to be followed when you're opening a new account for a client and when you're assessing the suitability of investments and borrowing to invest. So when we think back of the principles that we talked about around what a KYC conversation looks like, here they're referring to that client snapshot that we talked about, and then when we're looking at suitability, we're looking at the client's future plans and their risk tolerance to meet these two situations. Another consideration under Rule 2 is that any agent is required to update any material changes that they're aware of. This is speaking to the idea that we talked about earlier, where the Know Your Client conversation doesn't just happen once. It has to be a regular conversation you have with your clients on an ongoing basis. One of the reasons is the regulatory reason that you need to be aware of any material changes under MFDA's rules. With the MFDA, they also have requirements at each branch level, so in your particular office, and at your head office level. And those are all laid out in Rule 2 of the MFDA Code of Rules. We're going to post access to the full set of rules within your course on Moodle, so you can look deeper into the specifics of the rules going forward. It's also important to note that The MFDA, in addition to the rules that they have in place, has specific forms that you will need to fill out as an MFDA member when you are completing these activities. So when you're opening an account, the account opening information that's taken in is there is specific information that's required on that form, and when you're assessing suitability for investments and borrowing, there are specific forms that you have to fill out that are set out by the MFDA under their set of rules. Much like the Mutual Fund Dealers Association or the MFDA, IIROC has a set of rules around the provision of securities products. So IIROC is the Investment Industry Regulatory Organization of Canada. Again, much like the MFDA, they often go by their acronym IIROC because also their full name is a bit of a mouthful. And the rules that they have set out for the Know Your Client requirements are set up under Dealer Rule 1300. We'll give you access to the full set of IIROC regulations through a link in your Moodle account. But as you can see, there's quite a lot of rules, given that this is Rule 1300. So what they've also done is they've prepared a set of bulletins that helps dealers interpret what the rules say. Bulletin 12-0109 is the bulletin that is most concerned with the KYC requirements for IIROC. And basically what it lays out in quite a lot of detail is who you need to collect information from during a securities sale, what specific information you have to collect, when or how often you have to update the information on the people that you're collecting that information from, and then again, product suitability. So we can see again here how the same Know Your Client style of conversation could meet the needs that are here under the requirements in Rule 1300. So through the client snapshot, you'll be able to collect the specific information from each of the clients that you're dealing with. When you're doing your future plan discussion and when you're talking about risk tolerance, you'll be able to find out about product suitability. Again, there's a focus on updating information over time, so you do have to keep your information up to date from your clients at all times. So having that regular Know Your Customer conversation is going to be key in meeting the timelines that are laid out in Dealer Rule 1300 and the interpretation bulletin that we've referenced here on this slide. Again, much like the MFDA, IIROC has specific forms that you need to use in order to do security dealings. This is largely because they want to make sure that everyone is collecting the correct information from their customers so that no information is missed due to oversight. Okay, let's shift into the two organizations we're going to look at that operates under a set of principles or standards rather than a specific set of rules. The first of these is the Canadian Life and Health Insurance Association, or CLHIA. Now, they oversee at a policy level all people that are selling life and health insurance products, and they set standards, rules, and regulations most often that the insurance providers have to translate down to the insurance agents that are selling the products. So the regulations under CLHIA are set out under what's called their approach to customer service. What they say is that serving the client is done through a needs-based sales practices. And specifically what this approach does is it sets standards for knowing your customer, and those standards are client expectations, needs assessment, product information, and reasons for the recommendation. So what that in a more detailed fashion means is that you have to set realistic, fact-based expectations for your clients so they can know what to expect during the sales process. You need to do a needs assessment, so you need to look into what your client actually needs to fulfill their plans for the future. You have to provide accurate product information about the various products you sell that would be suitable for them, and you have to give your clients the reasons for the recommendation. So when we look at the specific KYC conversation that you might be having with a client, you'll be able to set expectations with them at the start of that conversation, and you'll also be able to determine their expectations through the client snapshot and the future planning portions of the discussion. When you're looking at product information and reasons for the recommendation, you'll be able to talk to them through the risk tolerance and change tolerance portions of the conversation and explain why these products are best for them based on their tolerances. The last of the specific regulators that we're going to look at today is the Financial Planning Standards Council, or the FPSC. This is the professional body that oversees financial planners with the Certified Financial Planner designation. There are financial planners that have other designations, but we're going to focus specifically on this one. Again, much like the CLHIA, the FPSC has a set of standards, and they're around providing holistic financial planning advice. So the expectation is that you are going to look at the client's entire picture when you give them advice. Generally speaking, the standards are around gathering complete and appropriate information from the clients and communicating effectively with them. The reference point for this is specifically in section PS3 of the Standards of Professional Responsibility that the Financial Planning Standards Council has laid out. Again, we'll give you a link in your course to the Standards of Professional Responsibility so you can review in detail what section PS3 and the various sections of the Standards of Professional Responsibility say. When we look at this in terms of the conversation that you're going to have with your client in the three parts, by taking a client snapshot and by looking at their future plans, you're going to be able to provide holistic advice to them because you're going to have the complete and appropriate information from your clients. Complete and appropriate information also means understanding their tolerance to risk and change, so that third portion of the KYC process is also meeting your FPSC requirements. Often within your organization, you may see a specific form for your Know Your Customer, for your client intake process. Now, the reason for this is twofold. It is your organization determining exactly what they want you to collect so that you don't miss collecting information. Additionally, it may be there not just for Know Your Customer reasons or KYC reasons. It may be there to help you at the same time as you're having those conversations meet the requirements of other regulations in place. So it may be to help you meet your privacy regulations as a company. It may be to help you meet anti-money laundering or anti-terrorism requirements and do this more efficiently. So by having a thorough conversation where you're really getting to know your customer and asking all of the right questions, you can ensure that you don't have to go back to your customer multiple times for similar information and make sure that it's feeling like a natural conversation between you and your customer rather than a situation where you're just filling out a form. Let's move on to some of the non-regulatory reasons that you want to have a Know Your Customer conversation with your customer on a regular basis. I said one of the reasons is regulatory reasons. The second reason I gave is customer service excellence. So I believe that customer service excellence is all about rapport and relationship. If you have a strong relationship or a strong rapport with your customer, you're going to be able to deliver customer service excellence to them because you're going to care about them and they're going to understand that you have a deep understanding and care for their needs. So there's a lot of specific information that you're going to collect during the Know Your Customer conversation. So the best way to frame this is getting to know your customer better. Treating it as a conversation where you're learning about your customer rather than filling out a form is going to help build that rapport. So perhaps rather than having that form in front of you when you're with the customer, review that form ahead of time, make some notes of the information that you need to collect, and then when you're speaking with your customer, take notes yourself about your conversation so that it shows that you have a personal information in your customer rather than just an investment in getting the form filled out. As that conversation continues beyond the client snapshot into future plans, you can help them have a better experience as a customer by knowing that you care about what they want to do with your life. And when this becomes a regular meeting, at least once a year would be the recommendation out there, more often than that if possible, you'll become a regular part of their life, and when they think about changes in their life, they'll start thinking about dealing with you. The final benefit of knowing your customer that we're going to talk about is using it as a sales tool. So this is never the primary focus, but it's definitely an additional benefit when you're in an industry where you're selling products. So when you learn more about your customer, you're going to find out more about what they need. This is specifically true in the future plan section of the Know Your Customer conversation. So by knowing that your customer has recently had a child and plans to send them to university, you can reasonably expect and rightly recommend that they may want to establish some savings for that. If your customer has retirement plans that they're very dedicated to meeting a specific goal, you can help them set up the funding for their retirement. If the customer has specific risks that they want to protect against, that you find out either in the snapshot or the future plan, or when you're talking about risk and change with them, you can help recommend insurance products to them that may help protect them against those risks that they're nervous about. Now, generally speaking, you're not going to be selling all of these products at the same time based on the profession that you're in, but it gives you an opportunity to see what you directly can sell to that customer. It also gives you an opportunity to build a referral network. So if your customer has a need that you can't meet, you can build partnerships with other providers out there where you refer business to them and they may refer business to you. Wrapping up this section, I just want to take a moment to review what we went over. So there are regulatory, customer service, and sales reasons why the Know Your Customer conversation is critical. So from a regulatory perspective, you want to be able to keep doing your job and keep your license or your designation or your registration, whoever that may be with. And if you have multiple licenses or registrations, it's great to have one tool or one set of processes that you follow that helps you meet all of those compliance requirements. And in meeting those compliance requirements, it's great if you can also use that as an opportunity to build a stronger relationship with your customer and to find out what other products and services you can provide for them to be providing better advice. By making this a one combined conversation rather than separate conversations, you're going to build a strong relationship and have stronger future business. I really want to stress that it should be a conversation that you're having with your clients and not an opportunity to fill out a form. If you're just sitting in front of your client filling out the forms that you need to fill out, they're going to see it as filling out a form because that's what you're doing with them. If you frame it as a conversation and if you treat it as a conversation, that's what's going to allow you to move this compliance activity into something that can build that relationship, that rapport, and that future with your clients. In our next section, we're going to take a look at a specific conversation in action so we can see how this might work and play out with an actual client.